of ours made us aware of Rob Bell, a former pastor of a professing Christian church, on his coming out in support of gay marriage. Here's what he said. Now, after seeing this statement, it struck us here at Grow Christian as strange and important enough to respond to. I mean, after all, Rob Bell is asking the church, actually he's imposing upon the church, to essentially change its definition on some very important and fundamental terms of our worldview, of the worldview of followers of Jesus and of scriptural teachings. If we're to change what has been commonly understood, then there are also some very important questions we can and must ask ourselves as humans, regardless of our worldview, for that matter. What is marriage, after all? What is fidelity? What is love? What is a man? What makes a man and a woman a woman? And then also, what is the church? And even more so, what is the appropriate role of the church in relation to the rest of the world? How does the church interact, or how should it interact with the world? This series will be discussing matters surrounding homosexuality in general, and gay marriage in particular. Our first 3 episodes are more of an in-house discussion. And this is very important for everybody to understand. Whether believer or not, these first couple of episodes are going to be dealing with an in-house conversation, how the church should react to this particular subject. It only makes sense. We're taking Rob Bell's statements and we're challenging those statements. This is a response to Rob Bell and those who believe like him that say they are Christians as well. Take it as a one pastor to another type of conversation, or one follower of Jesus to another. Listen, if you have a different worldview that is other than Christian, please understand the first 3 episodes assume and understood Christian worldview, and it's exploring that worldview and its judgment, or maybe that's a negative word for it, but it's decision upon the worldview. Now today, most expressly, we'll be dealing with the philosophical responses that the church could offer in response to gay marriage and homosexual behavior. Now again, remember this is in-house, and so we use the scripture and we use the scriptural principles as a guide for those things. We hope you enjoy. Now we want to approach this conversation from a posture of love and respect. I cannot stress that enough. I cannot stress that enough. This must come from a posture of love and respect as we have this conversation, as we have this discussion. And I'm going to try to refuse from using the word debate. Now, if I use the word argument, I mean it in the technical sense, and as far as an assertion, and it's following support to prop up that assertion. But as we challenge each other's ideas, in this segment, we're going to respond with some questions to those that hold similar or at least sympathetic views as Rob Bell has said he holds. There are a few things that his theology, his doctrine, and his worldview is saying that the church should do. Now, the first one of these examples of what the church should do is that it should not only acquiesce, give in. It shouldn't only give in, but it even more so should embrace ideas that are historically not only foreign, but are fiercely opposed to biblically rooted ideals, principles, and teachings. Now, what we see here is what we'll call our first logical inconsistency. And this is in the area of tolerance. We'll be talking about being and doing. Now, this particular question is a response in the area of the tolerance of what a person does or what they do. And our question is this, is why must the church or a follower of Jesus do something that the opposition is unwilling to do? Those of the opposing worldview, we're telling them in essence to do something else. They don't want to. We're being told that we need to do something else. The idea here is that it needs to be fair, and there's not a tolerance connection here. It seems that one side has to give in, but that's not logically consistent with what tolerance is. And I hope that I'm making that clear, that tolerance has to go both ways in the area of doing. Now, let's take a second seeming implied accusation here in the area of being. And again, this is an intellectual or a logical inconsistency. The question that we would ask is, why does the church or the follower of Jesus, why do we need to be ashamed? Or why should we be shamed into being something different than what we say we are and who we say we are, when again, those of an opposing worldview, in this case the gay and lesbian and homosexual community, is saying this is who we are. Don't try to change us. And again, none of this this first argument, isn't meant to put a nail in the coffin. It's meant sincerely and initially to get the conversation going in the area of tolerance. Now, a third thing that Rob's support of gay marriage and homosexuality implies, and we hear this from others within the same community of support and of sympathizers, is that the church should stop hating gays and lesbians. Now, let me be very quick to violently agree with you. If you're in this camp of hate, stop it, especially if you say you're a Christian. If you say you're a Christian, there's no place for this, there's no reason for this, simply stop it. You're confusing the conversation before we can even get one started. Now, that being said, I'd like to take a quote that we've seen on Facebook. Grow Christian seen and pulled off Facebook, and I wish I knew who to give credit to here. But this is the argument. This helps clarify what the argument is against the church in the area of hate. It goes like this. Do you seriously believe God will judge someone for loving a person of the same sex, but will not judge you for hating someone you've never even met? But here we come to our third logical inconsistency. This is misrepresenting the motive. It's maybe another term is building up a straw man. It's a straw man argument. The question here in response seems to be, where is the church or follower of Jesus instructed to feel in a way that's antithetical to Scripture, that's against Scripture? Where are we told to hate? We don't find hate to be what motivates us at all. Fourthly, others who agree with Rob Bell's position on the subject have said, as Rob Bell, that the world has more important things going on and that the church should focus more on the real problems. Maybe you've seen this tweet from Richard Dawkins. Forget about global warming. Forget war, poverty, disease. What really matters is whether other people in private sleep with their own sex. Now, it's very clever, Richard Dawkins, but to present this would be presenting what's called a false dilemma. A couple of questions that could be asked here as a follow-up would be, when has the church or a follower of Jesus, when has our scope or focus of involvement ever been limited to one thing at a time? And another observation, if this were true, wouldn't this mean the same thing to the proponents of gay marriage? Shouldn't they spend their time, money, lobbying, and all of those things on gay marriage? Shouldn't they spend their time first on these real problems, on these more important things, and then come back to the issue of gay marriage whenever that problem is solved? Now, I say that not facetiously. I say that not deceptively or ugly. I say that very honestly. If that's the case, that should be true on both sides. If we have more important things, let's wait on this and we'll come back to it once we've solved maybe some of the more important problems. Fifthly, we're told by Rob that the church should love, embrace, and affirm everyone, no matter where they are. And this brings us to our fifth logical inconsistency. We see here the equivocation or the confusing of the term and the definition, the attached definition of love. We would respond by simply asking, how is the church's motive unloving, unembracing, unaffirming if its goal is to lead the world to Christ and in effect save it? Our bringing people to Christ and into a alignment with Scripture comes out of the mode of love. You don't save somebody you hate. You save somebody that you love, at least from a Christian worldview. And the point is, we're supposed to love everyone. For God so loved the world, and we're supposed to reflect His image and reflect His heart. So we do the same thing, or rather we should. And again, is it wrong to tell people something they don't like to hear? Sometimes we risk friendships, family relationships. I may be doing the same thing with this particular episode and with this particular series, I hope that I'm not risking these friendships. But again, if I am, and if you're here and we're connected personally, I hope that you hear my heart. This comes from a pure motive of love and of asking questions and of challenging ideas. But don't we do this with our children? When we see they're wrong, we don't just love them and embrace and affirm them and tell them everything that they're doing is okay. No, we tell them we love them and we embrace them and we affirm them as people and as people that we love. But we tell them when we believe that there's a particular behavior or thing that they're doing is wrong. This comes from and should come from a genuine motive of love. Lastly, Rob Bell is quoted elsewhere saying, and again, this is still in regards to gay marriage and homosexuality. He says that God's inviting us to see things in new ways. And we need to say yes. And then we need to step into the future together. We have here one last logical inconsistency that we want to explore and we want to challenge, and we're going to call it the illogical leap of faith. He tells us not to have an objective standard for truth and for life, and then he gives us one. He tells us not to have one, and then he gives us one, his own. We would lastly ask, why should the follower of Jesus alter or even abandon his or her own worldview when the opposing ideals imposing change disagree with its most essential source of instruction, i.e. the Scripture? Especially when those in opposition cannot provide a better, more coherent, and objective standard that corresponds to reality. In closing this second segment, before we move to the third, it would seem from the challenges we presented here to Rob Bell's statements and stance on gay marriage and homosexuality as a whole, that they seem self-defeating when more closely examined. They seem to fail their own tests for a logical argument. And those are the things that we've challenged. Now, if you believe as Rob Bell does, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your reasoned out and respectfully formed opinions and thoughts and challenges to ours. Those things are welcome. The idea is it's real Christian. So grill us. First, you can do this a few different ways, or a couple of different ways. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, or you can like us on Facebook. And then what you can do is go and post a comment discussing your own views, or you can send a private message to us. Now, as we enter our third and last segment for today's episode, we'll offer some answers in accordance to our own worldview to the challenges we've raised in the second segment. In the first segment, we wanted to initially show the tension between these two worldviews. And as we went to the second segment, we wanted to simply challenge the opposing worldviews with some honest questions based on these 6 main points that we use. Now, in this closing segment, we'll now hit these same points very quickly with a response from our own worldview, the real Christian worldview, that we will in turn welcome your challenges and further thoughts. All right. In the first response of tolerance in the area of doing and embracing ideas foreign to our own, here would be the simple response, okay? I will tolerate what you believe you should do if you will pay me the same respect as I do what I believe I should do. And in this case, it's speaking out against what you do. Now, in the area of being, we're going to take a look at the first thing we want to pull out of Mr. Dawkins' quote from earlier in our second segment. And this is where our position would be. First is that this is not a private matter. That is the whole point of coming out. It's the whole feel and the expression of coming out and being putting your voice out there. And when you put your voice out there, you are welcoming challenge to it, whether right or wrong. In turn, if I'm coming out and speaking against what you are coming out and speaking for, am I not explaining what I am for and who I am and what my worldview is in regards to this particular conversation? And in fact, this is vice versa. It works both ways. This doesn't seem to be a problem. Again, this is in the area of tolerance, an argument from being and an argument from doing. Now thirdly, as we look back again at the false dilemma of hate, I want to show a quote by Rick Warren that addressed this particular issue and this particular argument. He says, "Our culture has accepted two huge lies. The first is that if you disagree with someone's lifestyle, you must fear or hate them. The second is that to love someone means you agree with everything the believer do. Both are nonsense. You don't have to compromise convictions in order to be compassionate." Here's the thing. The idea of loving your enemy is throughout all Scripture, is of loving your enemy, especially when you get to the things that Jesus says. Now, I would not make someone in the gay or homosexual or lesbian community, I'm not making them my enemy. Now, I will say those ideals are enemy or antagonistic to the scriptural worldview, and that's the whole conversation we're having here. Look, the enemy relationship is not in the people themselves, but in the ideas themselves, the worldviews. And it's important that we understand the difference between the two. I love you. I know that's weird, I know it's awkward, but I mean it. I don't even know you, but if you're watching this, I hope you can understand and feel that there is a genuine Christ-centered love for you, no matter where you are in life. Let's come back to Mr. Dawkins' challenge from a different angle in this fourth point. Again, remember his quote, he says, "Forget global warming, forget war, poverty, disease. What really matters is whether other people in private sleep with their own sex." Now, we talked about the in private matter. Now, what's interesting here in the false dilemma question is that he seems to be implying that's all the church is doing. Now, here's my challenge. I challenge this community, again, of viewers, to find one other entity, I mean the church in this standpoint, find another comparable group that commits as much money, as much manpower, as much personal involvement in all of these issues that Richard Dawkins seems to be inferring that we don't really do anything about. I challenge this community to find another group of people who are more involved by their blood, sweat, and tears, and by their finances than the church in this world. Fifthly, in the area of loving, embracing, and affirming, the church and followers of Jesus' teachings are commanded to always love, always embrace, and always to affirm any other human in the sense of their being. But it does not necessarily or logically flow that we have to do the same in the area of their doing. This is one of the most important points that must be understood in the Christian worldview. When you can understand this, it's what we do that we shouldn't, meaning sin, that we equate to sin. It's what we do that separates us from God. Then you can understand why we as followers of Jesus and in the teachings of Jesus and of Scripture, because of who we say we are, we feel a call to action to come out, yes, to come out and speak out against behaviors and ideas that are contrary to what God says is right. We're also commanded to do so out of a motive of love, out of a posture of embracing, and out of a quality of affirmation toward the individual as someone whom God has created and mandates by creative rights that he possesses. And lastly, and this would answer the sixth challenge coming from our second segment, as far as new revelation from God that we need to say yes to, let me be very clear. There are no objective grounds for new revelation that goes against what God has already given us in Scripture, in the forms of commands and principles and teachings. So then the question logically flows is, what does the Bible say and what does it not say about this particular subject? And this will be our next episode. As we close out this show, we've only begun this very important series. This is a discussion that should not be taken lightly, no matter which side of the fence you're on, no matter which side you sympathize with, or even if you're still on the fence about this particular matter in this discussion. Listen, it's okay to challenge each other's ideas. You have to ask yourself, this is one last question. How deep are your convictions? I mean, how deep are they really if you're not willing to be challenged by others? If you're not willing to be challenged to defend your own ideas? So, you've heard what we've had to say so far on this one aspect, just this one facet of this multifaceted gem of this conversation. You've heard what we've had to say. Look, Facebook and YouTube us your questions, your comment, your challenges, your support. In other words, it's up to you now. Come on and grill us.